We have a lot of breaking news to share in today's update. I do know many of you guys may have already heard the news about what happened yesterday, or let's just say on Thursday, August 19th, because I know some people are watching this into the future. However, I still do believe is that there is still a lot of misunderstanding to what's happening, and there's also maybe people that do understand what's happening, but I feel like we haven't really talked as much about the actual significance to what actually is going on right now. So we're going to talk all about that. But hey everyone, how's it going today, and welcome back to another fourth stimulus check and fourth stimulus package unemployment benefits extension update. So the story is what's really going on right now is that Biden came out to speak yesterday about what he plans to do about when it comes to the fourth unemployment extension. And so we'll actually start because there is actually some great news and there's some not so great news, but to make sure everyone's on board to officially put it out there is that the really great news to start is that after Biden came out yesterday is that Biden has officially expressed that when it comes to the fourth unemployment extension, he has now officially opened up the doors in order to have states now decide whether or not they want to take the unemployment and extend it even further beyond September 2021. So what this really means is that it means that now they are essentially giving states the power to choose whether or not they want to extend the unemployment even further. Now, I did make a video probably about a couple of days ago. I believe it's literally just called Can Unemployment Extend After September 21? Most of you guys already saw it, so huge thanks there. But if you just happen to be brand new here, I highly recommend checking that video out because inside of that video, I talk a lot more. It's not really about the news, but in that video I talk a lot more about the actual legal side. So hopefully there's something a little bit more original and unique about it, because I essentially talk about the legal side, about what they can possibly do. So they were talking about the politicians, the representatives, about what they can potentially do to extend the unemployment further, even if we end up running into like the Joe Manchin Democrat Biden situation that's been floating around, and that's kind of the surface answer. Of course, we already talked all about that in that video, so I'll put it at the end screen. But the reason I reference that is because one of the ways that I mentioned that they're going to potentially be able to do it is that even if they are not able to get it approved on the federal level, it is very possible that they may be trying to do it, but now on the state level, especially because, as we mentioned in that last video, and that video came out before Biden even made that speech. So huge thanks if you guys have been a believer throughout this entire thing, maybe comment. But essentially what happened is that I made a prediction that one of the ways legally that they can potentially do it is that they can take a lot of the leftover funds and try to allocate it in order to extend the unemployment program on their own. And so the, I guess, really great, certainly hopeful and promising news is that after Biden came out yesterday, it's now actually physically happening. At least certainly there's the power to potentially do it, and I think that's the really promising great news. Now there is one not so great news that we're going to share in a little bit, but I really just want to talk today about the significance now that you guys have a little bit of an idea about what all of this physically means for the fourth unemployment, and hopefully this video will apply to a much wider audience. Hopefully this is the video that can relate to the most number of people out there. So we're going to get started, but real fast, as always, the same drill. Maybe consider smashing the like button before we begin, because it's always greatly appreciated. And I mean, I think there's relatively hopeful news there. And then maybe consider subscribing and hitting the bell. If you guys are brand new here, huge welcome. If you guys have been here for a while, huge thanks for being around all this through, especially to anyone that kind of was a believer and supported that idea. So we are now finally actually see it coming to fruition. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, thoughts about honestly just really anything. So with that being said, let's get this video started right now. So what really ended up happening yesterday is that when Biden came out to speak about his personal plans with the fourth unemployment extension, is that, like mentioned, is that he is essentially now giving the governors of every single state the power to essentially now choose whether or not they want to extend it. So by this, what this basically means is that now the decision maker will lie in the hands of your particular representatives in your particular state. So it is actually relatively great news, because I believe is that he's giving them the power. It is believed that some states will probably do some kind of trigger system that they will decide on their own. But essentially what it is that if the unemployment rates are still very, very high, if something's going on with Delta, essentially is that there's going to be some kind of metric, and if they realize that objectively speaking, based off of the numbers, they feel it's necessary, is that they're going to potentially extend the unemployment now even further than September 2021. So that is the really, really great promising news. And this is actually even more true because in a lot of states, unemployment is actually starting to reverse again because of a lot of the new restrictions, a lot of the stuff that's going on, the cases that are rising. So the idea is that it means that there's a sense of potential for it to possibly happen. Now, because of course they are now given the option to do it, no decision has been made specifically, I believe, in really the majority of the states right now. So we really just have to wait for that information, because I believe is that over the next couple of weeks, what's probably going to happen is that all of the individual states are going to start to come out with their own decision of whether or not they want to do unemployment. The really relatively great news is that if you come from one of the 24 states that have been on unemployment and successfully been collecting every single week since, let's just say, something for the last several months and still actively continuing, and maybe if you come from a state that ended unemployment but was able to win it back by lawsuit, there may be a chance, and that's a little bit more of a legal thing that they can potentially do, but we're going to probably talk about that in another video because this is probably going to be a lot more on the legal side. But the great news is that if you come from one of those states, it means that if your governor still believes that there is a need for unemployment, it means that your governor is very likely, or just simply put, your representatives is going to potentially now do another extension even beyond September 2021. Now, in terms of how long that extension will be, how it's going to work, if it's even going to happen, again, because keep in mind is that states still have to make a decision, so it doesn't mean it's definitely happening, but it means that they do have the power and they have the option and control of whether or not they want it to actually physically happen. It's just whether they want to actually do it now. But the idea is that all of those details we're pretty much just going to have to wait for, but it looks relatively promising if based off of the logic, if you're still on the unemployment program, that it shows maybe your representatives still may very much actually support it. And so that is the promising thing. Now, there is one not so great news about what he mentioned is that the not so great news about what he mentioned is that while he is open to allowing states to continue the unemployment, what he is not going to be doing is he's not going to be now extending it on the federal level. So what this basically means is that it means that every single state will have to use their own funds, which they do actually have. There is still actually a lot of money left over from the first 3 stimulus packages that have been approved that they're going to use to allocate to fund this program. But the hard news is that it essentially means is that he doesn't plan to approve another package to try to actually fund or give more money to make this extension actually last a particular amount of time. So that is one thing about it. So we don't know how long it's going to last if your state does it. When Trump extended it briefly with the LWA program last year, it extended for 6 weeks. But I think at this point is that any amount could be relatively a lifesaver for a lot of people, especially if you really are kind of on a very, very emotional edge-like situation. I think hopefully it will become a lifesaver for as many as can be. But the hard news to take in is that because of what ended up happening, it also does mean that if you come from a state that sadly, and I'm just objectively speaking, is that if you come from a state where your governor does not support unemployment, does not support social programs, and has objectively already shown that by the fact that if you come from a state that has already actually ended unemployment early, it probably means that your state does not support the unemployment in general, and it probably means that it's not as likely you guys will be getting another extension. So essentially, whether this is great news or not so great news actually really does just depend on your particular state at the end of the day. I know it can be very maybe exciting for some people to take in, and I know it can be maybe hard for some and emotional for a lot of people to take in, but the big thing essentially is that if you're currently on unemployment, there's a chance that you may now get even more unemployment going forward. And if you were someone that, you know, was basically had your state end unemployment early, it means that you may actually now potentially get even less unemployment compared to the people that will now continue and carry on. So it is just something really, really important to know. I know it's can be very difficult to hear for a lot of people. It can be difficult to share, but I know it's probably even more difficult to hear, but it is just physically what's happening right now. However, of course, I do think it's important to mention is that everything that we talk about can change and has actually changed super, super fast when it comes to what they end up deciding. I did, of course, already talk about the ways that they can potentially extend it in that last video. I believe it's literally just called Can Unemployment Extend Past September 21? Most people checked it out already, so huge thanks there. But it talks a little bit about the potential options of what can actually come about over the next couple of weeks and ways that we can maybe try to potentially do it, or certainly to combat everything that's going on with the unemployment situation, whether or not we get more or whether or not it kind of just slowly slides based off of what's going on right now. But essentially that's what I pretty much just really wanted to clarify in today's video. So if you guys found that insightful, maybe consider smashing the like button if you guys haven't done so, even though I know it might be hard for some people, but you guys can decide. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, thoughts about honestly just really anything. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're watching this on release date, have a great weekend and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.